but they're still coming up.
Oh.
So they're still coming up with one.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we're live.
Okay.
Do we have somebody, or when do we start recording these meetings?
We've always tried to record.
Yeah. Perfect.
Well, I know that, what, 800,000 followers, so we gotta make sure they stay tuned in.
Exactly. Well, actually, the finance committee and the executive committee are the most watched.
Even over the board? The full board?
Yes.
Really?
Yep.
So like, what's a high volume of viewers?
100.
That's pretty good.
More than I would have thought.
Yeah,
Especially around the budget time.
of course. How much are my taxes going up?
Maybe not.
I like the delay. Tom's hands are moving quite a bit, and I'm looking across the table, and he's motionless. Oh, that's a big delay.
We'll try to do that then. I guess that'll be right. If not, someone will tell me.
Ready to roll?
I'm ready, sir.
Good. 8 o'clock. Let's call the finance and public property meeting to order. Everyone's here. Steve Hagemite is excused. I'd entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as printed and also approve the minutes from the June 3rd meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Virginia. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none, motion carried. Public comment? Ron? The monthly administrative report, financials, Paul?
Month of May financials. Sales tax collected for this month. $139,851. Year to date, $606,147. Compared to last year, year to date, this time of $561. So we're increasing little by little by little over last year so far. As far as individual departments, for the most part, nothing new. Other than, the treasurer still has that market value adjustment that we need to look at. The landfill still doesn't have the okay from the DNR to get a reimbursement for last year. Apparently they're short staffed, so it's taking longer. And I did put together a watch list because of the inflation, and in particular, gas prices have been at $5 or near $5 a gallon for quite some time. So I looked at everybody with a gas account, gas and fuel, and picked out which ones I think will be able to fit it in their budget, which ones won't. The sheriff is obviously, I think, the largest one that's likely to have an issue. A $50,000 budgeted for fuel through the end of May. They spent 55% on that. And gasoline was not $5 a gallon on January 1st. So unless it drops sometime in the year, they will clearly be over. And I don't know that they can fit that into their budget like they have in previous years, because that's going to be quite a bit larger than normal. Maintenance is about 46%. That's only $1,300. I think they'll be able to fit that in. If not, it'll be relatively small. Emergency management is over. That's because they had to fill a generator tank, which I think was 250 gallons of diesel. And they just got lucky enough where that was when it was closer to $5 a gallon rather than, they should be able to fit that in their budget. Parks right now is at 30%. A lot of that's seasonal. They really are about the same as they were last year. So that could go either way. Human Services has a line for gasoline. They're at 69%. That's for the shared vehicles they have. But they also have the transportation program, which doesn't have a line for gas and diesel. they lumped that in with overhead, which is why I hate accounts called overhead, because I'm not going to go through there and try and pick out the gasoline transactions. I will say though, when we update our system and chart of accounts, we will not have overhead accounts for that very reason. I do think gas and diesel is a pretty important part of the transportation program that needs to be separated. That one, again, part of a bigger human services budget. It's hard to tell if it will fit or not. Highway clearly uses a lot of fuel, but they bill for their services to other places. So much of that is going to be covered by billing to cities, towns, villages, maybe other customers they may have. And the only other item I had on the watch list is the Land Information Office. With Steve's retiring earlier this year, there was some splitting of the duties, and one of the items was a GIS consultant, and that was budgeted at 18,000, and that won't be enough for at least the first year. The first year is probably going to be the highest because it's kind of a guess of how much the work they're going to need to do and how much to budget. Other than that, other cost of living and inflation items are going to be harder to pick out because for office supplies, well, how much office supplies do you have, how much you need? It's seasonal, it's here, it's there, it's not as easy to find. When we start budgeting at the end of July, we'll put out the budget information. I'm going to once again emphasize where do you think you're going to end up this year, and I will hit that a little harder because of the inflation. I want enough work put into that, a better estimate, a good estimate of where we'll end up because of the cost of items is rising, and that way we have some time between now and the end of the year to do whatever we need to do. Other than that, nothing new.
I think the current economic situation is going to have a big impact on the 23 budget.
I don't know how it can't. You don't have 6% inflation, 7% inflation, and not have an impact. The question is, if we had a crystal ball, we can order a crystal ball. Is it going to stay the same, go up, or get worse? It's a best guess. We'll have to incorporate that and assume it's going to at least stay the same.
The question really comes down to when we talk about inflation, what parts of county costs does the inflation hit? We know it does for the gas. How much will we have it for other services and supplies? Plus, we also, and as the committee, and eventually we'll be talking about this in executive as well, we also have to think of another cost, and that's labor. The labor cost will need to go up. You have we have plenty of folks that are having to deal with the same type of inflation, so you will be seeing a recommended cost of living increase that will be above what was the latest? The latest WERC was 6.86% for CBAs beginning in November. So be surprised to see the administrator's budget have a significant increase in the cost of living. In fact, my feeling would be is that we do a cost of living and we don't move anyone in the step plan. We just do cost of living for 23. Little precursor there.
Here's your stuff.
Well, and I guess I'll say it this way as well. We've been fiscally responsible for a number of years to prep for bad years. There are ups and there are downs. We'll weather it. It may be a little tougher at times for us as a county, but we'll get through it.
What about on the revenue side? So we've got sales tax, which is seemingly on the increase. We've got other things that we actually bill for, the townships and whatnot. And I'm just assuming that we've adjusted our fee structure for that to account for that. So, is our revenue coming in higher than budgeted?
The largest one. that goes
Overall?
Over budget is the sales tax. And that one's continuing to increase. Other things, there's nothing that's short. So if we have the ability to adjust revenue for the rising costs, grant revenue, highway building, that's being done. Some of these, like state aid, it's a fixed dollar amount. A tax levy, once we levy it, it's a fixed amount. So it's a mix of raise where we can and cut where we can and make it come as close as possible to the budget.
From revenue standpoint, when you think of it, your property taxes are pretty fixed. We levy to the max, which only increases by net new constructions. Let's just call that historically 1%. Our sales tax continues to go up. Now, usually in recessions, people buy a little bit less, but again, to a certain degree, we also know that sales tax has kind of gone up because you're doing a 0.5% increase on whatever you pay. Well, prices are going up. Well, then sales taxes will go up as well. So the question comes down to, is there a reduction in purchasing that affects then the total amount collected? And what we're seeing right now is that's not the case. As for fees and other charges for services,
The one that's likely to go down. We budget a little for this, but the register of deeds has fees that are tied to refinancing and house purchases. And as that market slows, their fees will slow as well.
Yeah.
But we knew the last couple of years were higher than average. We budgeted around the average, not the last 2 years, because that wasn't going to last.
yeah, Paul makes a really good point, is that we don't try to budget on what happened last year, because then the volatility, we try to do 3-year, 5-year averages and go from there, both from a revenue standpoint as well as from an expense standpoint.
Still a guess,
Well,
Yeah.
but
yeah,
you're trying to make it
but
as
a much
educated
more
as you can.
educated, but a much more educated, because again, you can't predict the future, but what you do is you try to go back. And if we know that the last few years were positive, well, then we do it a little bit more on the low side. But as always, we've tried to be and budget very conservatively. We budget low on revenues and high on expenses.
And a 3 and 5 year average works pretty well. But now we've got 2020 in there and nothing was normal that year. So we're gonna have to factor that in for a 3 and 5
The
year
abnormalities is
average.
making it a
That's-
challenge. Yeah.
Correct. But the difficulty for 23 is that we're having a lot of things kind of coming at once, whether it's the jail, whether it's inflation, whether it's the recession. Yeah, there'll be challenges, but again, I'm looking at it beyond just 1 or 2 years. And what we've been able to see is that as a county, we do a pretty darn good job of budgeting. And if there's some tough years where we may have to use some fund balance, as long as you're not making that a regular occurrence, then I'm absolutely okay with that. That's part of the reason why you have fund balances, is to help you out in some short years and then build them up in the good years. So, if you'd like, Mr. Chair, I can go on to medical and dental unless there's other questions.
Questions? Paul, we can move on. Medical, dental.
Medical for as of the end of May, as you see, we're at 92% for medical. So we're doing pretty well there. Again, that's the last column on the right near the bottom, 92.23. Dental, we're at 107.69. So we're a little bit over what our premium collection is. But again, that's not bad. We have a healthy fund balance in dental. And then actually, we only have 6 potential large claimants on as of the end of May. And actually, that's pretty good. I know historically, we're usually a little bit higher, a little closer to 10. So with 6, with only 2 of them actually being over the stop loss, that's actually historically, we're in a good place right now for that. So if there's any questions regarding that.
Questions on that?
And I did not bring it with me, but did everyone get sent theirs? I'm almost positive I did.
If you overtime.
Yeah, the overtime, or did I not?
I did not get
I
it.
did.
That's my bad, because part of the reason why, well, and I can give it to you next month, is that today's the first, and usually we run it the first. I guess what I could do, as in when we start doing some of this other stuff, is I can quick run to the office and run the overtime reports. Again, from what I saw, there's nothing that is overly concerning for me. So, but I'll run some copies and just bring them back just so you have them. So again, nothing of real note from the overtime standpoint.
Students have a
Housing
housing
development,
development discussion.
I just wanted the committee to be aware. Tim Tremmel from the Bank of Luxembourg had invited myself and representatives from Luxembourg, Kewaunee, and Algoma to a meeting earlier this week with the developer SC Swiderski. They are actually doing I believe it's 120 or 102 unit apartment project in Chilton. Chilton's about 3,800 people. They had recently done an apartment development in Sturgeon Bay, and they're looking, they want to increase their footprint in northeast Wisconsin. And so they had done a presentation to the 3 municipalities, and Virginia, you were there. If I'm misspeaking or if you want to add, please do. The opportunity is they would like to do something in Kewaunee County. And from their standpoint, the big things that they're looking for from municipalities is land, an easy zoning process, zoning and approval process. And from my understanding is that if they can get the land fairly cheap, i.e. maybe for $1, they will do all of the municipal improvements, which is street, sewer, water, and the bit. And the project in Chilton is a project that is over $20 million. The project is about, I want to say about 14 acres. So I know that the municipalities, and talking with them after, is something they're considering, and then the municipalities will have to decide whether they want to move forward. They'll have to decide if at all they need a partner or not, and if so, then this committee would determine whether they want to partner in any respect.
Said that the deal with Keith DeKeen. Did it go?
Where, in Chilton?
The one in Sturgeon Bay.
It's over there by the Target, so I'm not sure. The developers are Swiderski or SCS. So I doubt it's DeKalb, but I could be wrong. So I wanted people to be aware of that. I
Do they
don't
have a
know.
timeline of any kind they're looking at? I mean, do they have something that's like, geez, we really want to have something shovel ready by?
What they had said is that, so let's just play this out for a second. So let's say that you as the city have 14, 15 acres and you agree and you have a development. It's roughly a 2-year process from the beginning to where you can start putting people in the units. So the biggest thing that they're looking for is a site, and they prefer that the city or municipality own it, so that way they don't have to worry about trying to purchase the property and how do we deal with the owner. Then we also have to get it zoned, and will the city zone it? More often than not, if the city controls the parcel, those approvals are expedited much more quickly. So I think there's an opportunity. And Swiderski is, a lot of their properties are throughout Wisconsin. They have some in Wausau. They did one in Florence. So they're expanding their footprint. They've already done one in Sturgeon Bay. So they kind of like to have a Northeast Wisconsin cluster of projects as well. they will own the apartments. What they're saying is that these are not Section 8, these are market rate apartments. So the apartments that are, I forget if they're 32 or either way, the rent is roughly about $1,000 to $1,100 depending on what the market is. So, and they have them all the way between 1 bedrooms and studios up to 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. So I think it's something that municipalities will definitely be wanting to take a look at.
One of the areas they showed is they weren't looking like apartment buildings. They had some that looked like a duplex type, single level and stuff like that, which would fit in on the west side of Algoma rather than the big tall buildings. And the other thing, the rent sounded high at first, but then it said it included everything but electricity, the water, the internet and heat and all that's all included in the rent price.
Yeah, the electricity is only for the lights.
Yeah.
The heat themselves, they pay for because I believe it's water heat, but they pay for it. There's laundry in each of the units. So
They did say on some of the ones that were duplex or single that they would entertain into selling some of the units but they wanted to make them all kind of blend together and everything, but they would be open to selling some of them, but otherwise they were coming in as landlords.
and they're again, from their portfolio standpoint, because they have these developments in a number of towns, and these aren't large. While they have done some in the Fox Valley, in the Fox cities, they have a lot of them in smaller cities, because again, they're seeing that there's a market there, there's demand there. A lot of other developers are not taking advantage of it. So they decided to kind of step into that opening. So.
Anything else on housing? Okay, vendor payments, everybody should have seen that, had a look, opportunity to look at them online. Questions on the vendor issues? Not, we can move to supplemental payroll. We should have seen that. I'd entertain a motion to approve the supplemental payroll.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the supplemental payroll. All in favor? Aye. Motion is not- motion
Are you doing minutes?
Yeah. Are you?
I thought it was my turn.
Okay, we're
Yeah,
on
right.
to other such matters that might come before the committee is authorized by law.
One that came up in the last 30 days or so. So we've got the opioid settlement, the first round of them have been to the point where the settlement amounts and the payment schedule has been released. A group, including PMA and Wisconsin counties and I think Citigroup, are putting together a proposal for what they call securitization of the payments. I've gone back and forth with this. So when I first hear that, I think tobacco settlement, where the state of Wisconsin gave up like half, so they could get it early and spend it early. And like, I'm not really interested. I listened and I watched the first proposal, and what they showed actually made it look a whole lot better. So I jumped to this head, oh, maybe this is worth it. The reason being, Johnson & Johnson and distributors are the two parties here. Johnson & Johnson has a AAA credit rating. Their payments go up for, I think it was 9 or 10 years. The distributors, on the other hand, have a much lower credit rating of Baa3, which is mid-grade. And their payments are stretched out, I think it was 18 years. So the proposal was to get some money up front, which would take away the risk. Okay, and the first presentation that looked okay. Looking at the details, the last time, it's not as it seemed, and I'm leaning back to the other direction of, I'm not sure it's worth giving up a large chunk of money just to say we're going to get it up front. So that's kind of ongoing. The details that kind of change that is they're not going to securitize the Johnson & Johnson payments because it's a shorter period and their credit is better, but they will the other ones. So the amount we're giving up would be worth it if, say, they would go bankrupt and we wouldn't get any of those payments. But what's the chance of all three drug distributors going bankrupt? I'll watch it once more time. I'll see what the actual proposal comes out to be. I'm not really leaning in favor of it right now, but I think I need to see the presentation they have in detail. But that would be coming up probably the next finance committee meeting, where here's the proposal, are we interested or not? And if we're not, then we just take our payments. If we are interested, we'd be lumped together with any other counties and cities that are interested and packaged together where bonds would be issued and we get a reduced payment for that front, or for the distributor's portion. But we'll find out more and bring it back next.
Oh. The other copy.
Just so you can do it
So
both
I
from the
can-
right, you can
So I
get it in
did- I did
stereo.
follow that.
And
Save that for next month.
there, I concur with Paul in that we looked at Janssen or Johnson & Johnson and the distributors and what their current debt is rated at and the like, and the likelihood of them going bankrupt and being out of business. I'm not sure that that's really worth the risk of securitizing, plus the percentage, if we look at it, is not at, while it's higher than what the tobacco securitization was, if you remember that years ago.
I'm not sure it's that much.
at all.
Because the
right.
first presentation included Johnson & Johnson.
Right.
They're not securitized. It shouldn't be in that.
Correct, it shouldn't be. So the whole part is, yeah, let's just keep our payments. It's unless there's something else that really comes out, then let's just keep our
Are they
payments.
able to do whatever the terminology is where they restructure, rebrand, and they wash and scrub their debt? It's a bankruptcy, but yet they still stay solvent.
Like a chapter 11 type of.
Yeah, so what are the odds of somebody doing that just because of, it's just an easy way to eliminate the debt?
I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really say. But again, I'll go back to securitization from the tobacco standpoint. Most of those tobacco companies did not go out of business. They may have gotten bought, but I don't think that they were then that they were cleansed of those debts and those payments.
Okay, how much money are we talking about?
Between 350 and 400,000, spread over 9 and 18 years.
18, yes, 9. The first one's like 9, 10, and then the other is 18. And there's going to be a couple other companies
Yeah,
coming.
there's more.
This is just Johnson & Johnson distributors, but there's like Malin Roads and a few others. But
So what is a recommendation on what that money would possibly get earmarked for in the county then?
we haven't done that yet. There are some kind of like ARPA money. There are specific things that it must be tied to. It has to be tied to opioid. Now, whether that is from a sheriff's standpoint with there, or if it's with human services, we're still having some conversations regarding that as to how best to do that.
So pretty
Sure, Matt has some ideas.
Well, we work with
Yeah,
Scott
right.
Murphy, Human Services, have the FACES group, Families and Communities Encouraging Success. And so that's sort of collaborative, where human services, public health, sheriff's department, we all sit around the table and we talk about prevention. We talk specifically about opioid. So yeah, anything that we would do, I think would be done in sort of a collaborative.
We may even be thinking of talking with the judge, because I don't know if we'll specifically do a drug court, but we could do some type of hybrid of that, where for folks that are convicted of some type of opioid or drug crime, that we could provide some wraparound services or addiction services to try to do that. So we haven't formulated anything specific at this time. And part of the reason why the money's so new, I don't want to be spending it before we really think of.
But to start the conversation isn't a bad thing, and I think part of it would be is if there would be some sort of a program that we can stop the cycle, right?
Correct.
Preventative.
Correct. I have two other things,
All
Mr.
right.
Chair, if I may. I was contacted by a company. I forget exactly their name. Their name is Pace Equity. Pace, which I forget exactly what it stands for, but the PACE program is a program that would allow, from an economic development standpoint, is that projects can use the estimated savings of doing energy efficiency, and they can use that money up front to help finance the project. There is a potential project in the city of Kewaunee that may be looking to use PACE funding. So they're giving us a heads up that they may want to do that. What the county will need to do is they will need to pass an ordinance and a resolution, basically, what do I want us to call it? Enrolling the county in the PACE program. From a financial impact standpoint, the county provides no funding, nor do they have to provide any funding. The only potential financial impact could be, and I have to look a little bit closer at the language, is that the PACE would be a special assessment, and depending on how the special assessment goes, we don't even pay those out, but the ordinance may say that we would. And that's where I'd have to see what the wording is.
The only way it would affect us is if they stop paying their taxes and if they fell way behind. Special assessments get collected first. And if we ended up foreclosing on it, and by then that's very far down the road. But the special assessments being collected first, we may get delayed tax collections. If this is up and running and operating, there is no impact to us. It's just an addition on the tax bill.
I did see,
As long as that contract doesn't.
I don't know where that came from, but I know what you're talking about, the PACE program, and it sounds interesting. I would just be concerned with what other strings are attached, because that just doesn't come easy
I know
without
that
some obligation.
well, from the county standpoint, there are 41 other counties that are already enrolled in the PACE program. And again, from what I've been able to read and to gather, is by doing that, it allows these projects to access a funding mechanism that they normally wouldn't be able to do.
But there's the yeah, but.
My feeling is this, is if this was as bad as it could be, I think we would have heard things already. And I have not heard anything negative right now from enrolling in a PACE program.
How long has it been around?
Since it's been a number of years.
Really?
Yeah, it has. This is not recent. This has been around for a while. Of course, can I tell you exactly when? No, I can't. But yeah, it's been around for a while.
That's what we're looking at.
Yeah, this is just a heads up. I don't need anything this month. I won't need anything next month. They were smart enough to give us a heads up and say this will possibly be coming down the road. And so I'll be sending out some information to you probably in a week or two, just so you have it.
This is actually being proposed by the developer, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. Because
It's called a PACE program.
PACE, P-A-C-E. So if you go to www.pacewi.org. So again, just wanting to give you a heads up on that. And then I have two more heads ups. Winter Park. It is July now. It's July. No, we are exactly. Exactly. For years, we've done Winter Park, and it's kind of been a verbal handshake type of agreement between ourselves and the Winter Park Association. The amount of revenue that's being generated, we can't do that anymore. And so in the next, probably in early August or at our next meeting, I will have a draft agreement between the Winter Park Association and the county, which will therefore delineate how those revenues are divvied up. And the reason why I say that is this. We know that there are basically four specific revenue sources when Winter Park is operating in the winter. One is tickets for the tubing hill and private parties of the tubing hill. The other is the ski hill. The other is rentals of skis. And the fourth is concessions. Now, in 2021, that totaled out to about $180,000. Now, how we have previously been doing this is that the Winter Park Association got 50% of the tubing revenues and the county got 50%. The Winter Park got 80% of the ski hill revenues and county got 20. And then the Winter Park got 100% of rentals and concession. I have a problem with that. The reason why is Winter Park does none of the staffing of the tube hill, especially not with private parties and even on Saturdays when it's open to the public. It's county staff that we pay and we do all of the staffing of the tube hill.
And all the maintenance.
Correct. And I'm not even talking the maintenance part. Second part from the ski hill, actually, we do the staffing of the ski hill.
We do now.
Correct. They used to, but they didn't.
If we're unable to.
Correct.
Our staff is going there. And when we have a hard time finding temps, that means our regular staff is out there.
With
And
overtime.
anytime it's overtime. So
Now-
that split of revenue,
Right.
they have worked once upon a time, it doesn't.
And as for now, the Winter Park staff do the rentals and the concessions. So it is going to be my recommendation to this committee that the county collect 100% and retain 100% of all tube hill revenues. We're the ones staffing it. We're the one maintaining all of it. That's ours. The tube hill, the ski hill, I'm open to a split. As for rentals and concessions, since they staff it, I don't have an issue with them keeping the rentals and the concessions. But doing that will definitely allow the county to do a couple different things. One is that if there's additional staff that are needed, we have the revenue to pay for those staff. And that's really important. So I'll be bringing forth a draft agreement with the Winter Park Association regarding that
One more
for you to
reason
take a
to
look at.
So we've got snow guns, I think there's 4 of them, and we've got groomers. All of those are expensive, 6 digits. They've been around for 20+ years, I think. Those are gonna start coming up as needing major renovations or replacement. We need to start saving for that now.
So when we're looking at income and expenses on that, why aren't we charging off our labor that the county is providing off the top? If we're doing a split, even if it's the wrong split, 80-20,
Because
why aren't we getting that off the top?
That's a good question, because we haven't been doing that. We didn't do it in the past.
So are we having this conversation with the Winter Park
We
Association?
will be having a
I'm gonna
conversation.
get blindsided and all of a sudden
Oh,
we're out of
you-
here.
You will get a call. And honestly, if they were to say, we're out of here, that Winter Park was still open. The ski hill may not be open, but let's be honest, the vast majority of the revenues and why people use the park is for tubing. Tubing will continue on until we can get sufficient staffing for the ski hill. But yes, in the future, we will be, and the other reason why is the county was not the one collecting the funds. It was the Winter Park Association.
So I'm not totally up to speed with the whole history of it. I mean, I've got a
Correct.
pretty good idea that there was a lot of volunteer time and a lot of
There used to be.
dedication and
Yes.
money. Where is the Winter Park Association revenue side going? Where does that money go these days?
Well, and
Did they buy all the rental equipment or did the county?
I'll say, as for the skis, I'm gonna guess that was theirs.
Okay.
But, and again, we have to be very clear as well. When you call it Winter Park funds, essentially, they're county funds. Why? Because let's use the tubing hill as a perfect example. So in 2021, we collect over $125,000 just in tubing funds, of which the Winter Park did none of the staffing and definitely didn't do any of the private parties. Well, at 50-50, they got 63,000 of that. So when you say that they have money, they're the only group that we do where they don't do fundraising. Basically, the county gives them a portion of those funds that, again, they aren't staffing. So I think of the zoo group. Zoo group does fundraisers. The county doesn't give the group money. We put money towards capital projects, but we don't give the organization money. So, like I said,
They
go ahead.
have put a lot of time and effort into building it over the last decades.
Correct.
But
But-
without the volunteers, things have changed. Unfortunately, every organization out there has a hard time finding volunteers. Without those volunteers, you know, if we're going to open it, we have to have certain levels of staffing, which means now we're paying them, which changes the equation.
And I'll even go with the magic carpet. Yes, they bought it, but we paid for it first. We loaned them the money. So we paid for it. And let's be honest, we then gave them money for us to pay us back. Essentially.
Right.
So the agreement has to change. I'm not saying, and I am not trying to denigrate the good work that Barry and the Winter Park Association has done. What I'm saying is that we can no longer have the agreement the way it is. When it used to be this small little park that not a lot of people went to, that was a different story. Now it is definitely a draw in the winter. We have people coming from all over the place, and we have to have people to do that.
We gotta recoup our expense side of things.
Right, and so for us, sorry, go ahead, John.
We cover it with insurance, we cover everything.
Correct. Correct.
I mean, plus now there's talk, they want to put the new ski lift in there. So obviously, the idea is we're gonna go to the county and get some money from the county to put it in, but I mean, basically, it's the same thing, magic carpet. You're gonna come to get the money, you want to get the money from us, and
We'll give you money to pay us back.
But that money, the revenue that Winter Park has been generating should be self-sustaining. They can reinvest in itself to pay for these things. They shouldn't have to come out of additional resources of the county off the general fund, for example.
Well, and I don't disagree with what you're saying, but the point, the real issue comes down to this. They're not the ones staffing.
Right.
If you just go with the things that they staff, then if we were to allow them to have 100% of the revenues and concessions because they staff those, then they would get about $27,000 a year in revenue. Which to me, yes. Well, with total, yes, because concessions was about 14.4 and rentals was about 12.6. So to me, you staffed it, you can keep that money. You don't staff the tube hill. You don't staff the ski hill.
How much is our expense on making snow?
I don't know how
That's
well
gotta
we
be a
do
lot
it.
of money because
Well,
been
it
a part
depends.
making snow for snowcross racing, and it's not cheap to build a track.
Run it as an enterprise fund.
It could possibly, but
Just
it should be,
run-
but-
Basically, we run it, the internal service fund.
the problem that you have is you're going to want to have one enterprise fund just for Winter Park.
Oh, I would certainly.
It still doesn't change the finances for
Correct.
either covering our costs or not. And right now, we kind of barely are. Overtime and regular staff versus temporary is absolutely.
I think, John, I'm on the same thought process as you, but the way the money's being tracked, it's all there, and it isn't like there's a large surplus for Winter Park that you would be enterprise fund that it wouldn't be able to be drawn off. That would be the only
I mean, I would want to see that any surplus that is there,
stay there.
stay there. So that we, and I'm gonna pick on you, so that we don't pull some of the things that the cities have done,
Mhm.
and you too. But you take and the money is supposed to be there for that. But what we did is we spent it on the road over there. So what we did is we wrote an IOU to ourselves.
Mhm.
Can we do an enterprise fund? We can. The bigger point is doing good accounting.
Yes.
Because enterprise fund, not enterprise fund, as long as we're doing a good accounting of what the revenues are, what the expenses, and honestly, my feeling is if we change the agreement and the county collects the money or the places that they staff, that's gonna solve 95% of the issues.
If you really want to make sure that the money that we collected surplus is assigned, then we'll assign a fund balance specific for that. We can do either way.
Well, the reason being is, okay, let's say we've got a $30,000 net profit in Winter Park.
Right.
We want that to carry over and continue to build, right? So every year, if we've got $30,000 profit, next year we got 60,000 in the bank for Winter Park. So when it comes time to buy a new groomer, all of a sudden we've got 100,000 there.
I both agree and disagree. And I'll go where I agree. I understand the purpose of it, but you don't have to have a designated fund to do that. We have a capital improvement fund and a capital improvement plan. So what happens is if we have $30,000 that is going back, because it's all the county's money anyways, and we have on the plan that we're gonna buy a groomer in 2027, well then, we'll buy a groomer in 2027 because the county knows that those funds are going to be expended in 2027. You don't necessarily have to have a separate designated fund.
No, we are doing that. No, Winter Park is that big. There's no way we can incorporate the highway internal service fund in the general fund. That would be ridiculous with the size and scope of that. But Winter Park, we're already doing it. We know what's coming up for capital purchases. And we can accomplish the same thing either way. And I have no preference one way or the other.
But I'm just saying, if we've got the groomer, right? And we're gonna buy a groomer. And if it's budgeted for 2027 as capital purchase and the money's not there because we haven't generated the revenue at the Winter Park, it's just gonna come out of the general fund. We're buying the groomer, it's there. And the thing I don't like about that is we're not looking at it as a business that it's either making money or not. Is it being subsidized by the taxpayers or is it self-sustaining?
Well, and again, I both agree and disagree in that. So let's say that it's bad years and Winter Park does need a new groomer. And if we don't, and in fact, the groomer shot, if we don't buy a groomer, then Winter Park doesn't open.
We're buying a groomer, but would Winter Park pay that back or it's just?
Hey, you're taking out of the right pocket then to pay back to the left pocket. So I'm not saying you can't do it. All I'm saying is that if you want to, fine, but either way, it's all about the accounting of it. I'm not saying don't do it. All I'm saying is that you feel that if we don't do it this way, then now, if we do good accounting, we're good.
An enterprise fund makes it easier to see, but the same things are gonna happen. So if we're really need to want to see that, okay, well, then as a part of this transition.
Because if you look at an audit, how is that gonna appear on paper? We wanna, one day down the road, it comes up and it's like, geez, Winter Park, we're losing our tail in this thing, we just keep throwing money at it. We bought a new groomer. We've spent $200,000 in the last 5 years and not had any return on that. How else would you know if you're not tracking it in such a way that you're seeing your return on investment?
We do have Winter Park revenue and Winter Park expenses separate in the promo and rec department. So there is.
To include a capital purchase, that type of thing, we would be
We would
able
have
to know.
outlay in there, yes.
Okay.
And if we need to save money aside, we can do that in the general fund by assigning a fund balance for replacement of Winter Park. We also have the capital improvement fund where if we have a large purchase that doesn't quite fit into our 5-year plan, we'll take some out of there to cover it. So let's say the groomer just completely fell apart. Now we have to buy it now. We didn't plan on buying that for another 3 or 4 or 5 years. Well, then we'll have to take some out there to cover it because we have to have it now or Winter Park doesn't open. So we have that cushion built into it. So either way, whether it's an enterprise fund or not, we can make it work.
So if somebody asks how much money we made in the last 5 years or lost, it's easily tracked to include the purchases and everything else.
For the most part.
Yeah, we have a Winter Park activity for all the expenses. We have a handful of Winter Park revenue accounts, and we look back at the history of it.
Well, the only thing that we haven't done, and we haven't done it for any of the parks, is I had tasked Mr. Myers, Dave Myers, when he first became director, is that I would like to see our 3 major parks. The goal is to eventually make them kind of cost neutral, i.e. Bremer Park, Ryan Park, and Winter Park. Well, Ryan Park, for the most part, is pretty cost neutral. Winter Park, I would say, is cost neutral, if not a little bit extra. And Bremer Park, we hope to get there. The other parks, that's going to be difficult. The part that we haven't done, if we want to get down to the pennies, is we haven't figured out the overall administrative costs that could then be attached. Dave's time, Jen Salentine's time, some of those folks. But again, either way, Supervisor Whiter is, could we do it as an enterprise fund? We could. Could we do it the current way and you'd still get the data that you need? Yeah. So the preference could be to the committee, and in the big picture, I'm fine with that. The part that I always get leery of is when we start to get too much into departments having their funds, then they believe that's their money. And it's not their money. It's the county's money. And I always get leery of that.
When we implemented the timekeeping system, so we went away from paper time cards, one of the things that says we need to track how much time he's spending at which part, because that wasn't before. On Dave's salary like me, so the time he spends, it's one of those things that's a lot at the end. Here's how we spend this much in labor and everything else. And at the end, here's how much of the director's time is there. Because if Winter Park went away, we still have a park director. So assigning dollars to that doesn't necessarily make sense. It's a good thing to know that that takes 150% of his time during the 2-week season, but there's no assigning actual part of his salary there doesn't always make sense, because we're going to pay him to be parks director whether or not Winter Park is in existence.
So stay tuned, I guess is what I'm saying. And then my last part.
Just one thing.
Sure,
Winter
sorry.
Park, does Winter Park Association, they don't own any buildings on our.
Correct, they do
So,
not.
but do they pay us any rent for using the county building for their concession? And
No. And again, the agreement had always been, well, they're staffing it, so then we don't have to.
yeah, they're staffing it during the season, and then in the off season, there's a lot of maintenance that's done, and they wouldn't do that.
But didn't they did the materials for the building and the improvements down there come out of them?
You're talking to if there was stuff, that was before my time.
Yes,
Paul may know.
but again, where's the source of their funds?
Right,
Ticket prices, which is not a part, so
right.
it's really one big source.
It's a pass through.
Right.
We're giving money to another group to pay for something that we essentially pay for. So,
Okay. Thank you for that.
so.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. So you'll see something in August. And I am going to assume that you and Mr. Massler may receive a call or calls. Because when I put forth and make them aware that I am proposing that we collect all tube hill revenues and the like, that's a significant part of revenue for them. But again, they provide no staffing.
Well, I think they should have an opportunity to speak to the committee on their own behalf, and what their argument is for justifying we should get this and we should get that versus the county just suddenly decides this is how it's going to be. I think the committee would probably like to hear their side.
That's
I
up
mean,
to
I
up to
would,
the
I don't know
committee.
about you guys, but
We
I
did
think
something sorry.
sorry, but
I
I'm just saying that, it, as opposed to us just suddenly, boom, striking these people down, we definitely want to hear their side.
What did they owe us yet for Magic Carpet?
They either just made the last payment or the last payment's coming next March. I think they just made the last payment in 2020. Yeah,
So
I think they
that-
just made the last. payment.
That could be cleaned up and then we start from scratch here again.
I look at this similar as the fair contract. When I'll call it renegotiated, but we reset up the fair contract because the fair contract when I first came was back from 1980 and had never been updated or the like. And so I had brought a contract to the committee to therefore approve, of which we made some changes, of which, yes, the fair board wasn't happy about certain things of that. But again, it's county property, it's county buildings, it's county staff, it's county costs, and those things need to be brought into the contract. So
So, Mr. Chair, I would request that when we have a proposal by the administrator, that we would have the Winter Park Association at that meeting and have them made aware of what the proposal is prior to the meeting, and that they can come and speak to the finance committee.
It is my intent of giving them a copy of what the proposed agreement would be prior to it coming to this board, to this committee. That's absolutely just like what I did with Sheriff.
Yeah, there's just a lot of history there.
Yes,
A
there
lot
is.
of history there.
We could actually have them on the agenda for that item.
Yeah,
That's
They
fine.
could show up.
yeah.
That's
I think
fine.
That would be
Sounds good.
productive.
And then my last item, just so everyone's aware, I'm sick of all of you. So the second week of July, not counting Monday, I will be out of town. That's my anniversary.
Wow.
And so 12th through the 15th, I will not be in town. And then I'll come back for a week and I'll be tired of all of you again. So I will be gone for the last week of July. We'll be doing family vacation going to Colorado. So just so everyone's aware that if you're calling or emailing me, you may not get a response. That's all I have.
Do you have any idea when the audit's gonna be done?
It'll be presented in August, both the highways and the whole town.
Okay. And then just, I don't know if anybody, since the last county board meeting, when we talked about, not we, but when the presentation was made on the financing of the proposed jail, has anybody got any comments back from anybody regarding the financing? Because I haven't gotten any calls from anybody.
None directly.
I actually got two comments, one from a former county board member, not unlike one of those that came in at the recall. And she told me that at that time when we recalled the county board, maybe it was a good thing, maybe it was a bad thing, but the worst thing we did was not go to jail. And I think that seems to be, those that remember it 20 years ago, seems to be the dominant thing, is that we was kind of screwed up. They seem to, if the ones that I did talk to, they seem to agree the fact that what we really should have done is built the jail, and we wouldn't be dealing with it now. I haven't heard anyone that's been against it so far.
The former board chair had contacted me, actually had stepped into my office. And so he had commented, he had looked at the cost and the, having been part of the very first group, and he was, what's the right word? Cited is not exactly the right word, but he was very approving of the proposal that's been put in front of him.
Well, and I think in regards to that, there's all this discussion, shoulda, coulda, woulda, and the timing, that everything is a whole different environment than it was then. Should we have built the jail back then? Sure. Is it costing us more than it would have then? Of course it is. But there is also, through the hard work of the sheriff's office for all these years, the county's actually saved money going ahead. We don't have that $1 million a year extra salary cost. We didn't have the payments on it. We'd probably be looking at a new roof by now. So it's kind of relevant, right? But at the end of the day, everybody recognizes, I believe, everybody I've talked to, we need the jail, and the time is now. And it's just not a matter of should we or whatever. It's how we go forward with it, how we break down the finances, how we're looking at the impact per house. And I think it's being as well received as one could for a $20-some million project.
The only comment I did get, it wasn't a call, it was just in a casual conversation, is that that $21 million plus project is only going to cost me $40 on the house. It's pretty reasonable.
Mhm.
That's what I heard.
Well, again, that's also some creative work on the administration side.
Well, don't look just It's.
I mean that as a whole.
Right, okay.
I mean that as a whole.
You're included in that. So if there's a positive thing about this thing, it's.
I
not
get all
that-
the accolades, he gets all the blame. That's how.
That's
that
how it
works.
works.
It's that type of financing is not a big impact on the taxpayer. Not like it was that we were talking about 2 years ago.
Well, and we want to be careful because Paul said this and he's spot on. And so is when we first asked 2 years ago, we just asked flat out, what would be the impact? We didn't talk about refinancing.
Sure.
We didn't talk about paying down anything. We didn't. So it was just flat out, here's a dump of what the stuff is, but no type of, what do I want to call it? Looking at ways to how we can lessen that impact.
So if you ask me to design my next house, I'll do that, and I'm gonna have a huge house that I can't afford, but I'll put a dollar on it. Now, once I work it down to what's my next house gonna look like, it'll be closer to the $20.
Today's market, a tool shed.
Yeah. So,
$6.
yeah. That's only 2 feet.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's.
That's right. Run straight.
That's all I had, Mr.
Okay, anybody else have anything under other matters? If not, next meeting, August 5th, 8 o'clock.
We have a Tuesday before the.
Oh, that's right. Yes, we will have an hour before the county board meeting on July 19th. Finance will meet at an hour before, and the reason why is because you will be approving the resolutions regarding the jail. Or at least I hope you will be approving the resolutions towards the jail. There are 2 resolutions. One is approving the, I'll call it the design and the overall project. And then the second is the approval of the financing, basically the issuance of $21 million of geo debt.
That's at 5 o'clock.
Correct.
At the fairgrounds.
Yes. We'll just go into that 4-H room.
Anything else? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded to adjourn, all in favor? Aye. Hearing none opposed, motion carried, we are adjourned at 9:01.
So I don't
Thank you,
have to do
everyone.
the minutes then?
No.
I'm sorry, I thought because the last 2 times you had been doing the minutes.
We don't have a gym.
Next week.
Yep.
Next Friday.
And I think, it-
I've got it for next Friday. I just did
8
it.
o'clock, right?
There's only one person watching it live.
Yeah, us.